forward because on the live stream you look a little dark.
Okay.
It's hard to get a balance so we can see you and we don't watch
see
this
that.
side.
Yeah, you
So,
bet. I'm glad you're looking out for that. That's good. You want, yeah. Okay.
I'm going to make it awkward to take a picture before we start.
Oh, yes, that would be lovely.
All right, we're just going to go straight for it, right?
Okay.
3, 2, 1. Thank you so much.
Hey, good evening, everybody. Appreciate everyone coming out to our annual college update night. My name is Mike Kaminsky. I'm one of the counselors here at the high school, and Miss Archer is in the back helping out with the questions for this evening. I want to make sure that everyone did receive one. I think we got everybody, but if you're missing a copy of the questions, just wave your hand and we'll grab you a copy. I'd also like to welcome and introduce our college representatives that made time in their busy schedules to be with us this evening. It's my pleasure to introduce Toby Jones from John Carroll University. Heather Chase from Miami University. Laren Wenzel from Ohio Wesleyan University. And Natasha Diaz from Ohio State University. Definitely want to thank you all for being here. I will now turn it over to Heather, who has our first question, and we will get underway.
Yes, thank you. Thanks so much. Thank you for joining us tonight on this kind of yucky night. It's good to see you all out here. My first question I will read to you guys. How would you advise students to research colleges, discuss the value of a campus visit, and how students can maximize their visits? My daughter is a junior right now in high school, so I am living this 100%. And I've worked in college admission like 20 years, and I still am in the dark. So I think researching initially happens so well in the high school environment through whatever, Naviance or whatever system that the high school uses to just kind of start that searching process. But then I think you do really have to get out there and pound the pavement, so to speak, and do some some college visits that allow students to see what's out there. I'll tell you my own story. My daughter, I've worked for Miami for 14 years, and so I was all excited to take my daughter to Miami, and she was like, I don't like this. I was like, are you kidding? Like, this is what I've been doing your whole life. But just getting her there was so different from all she had seen in print or online. And when she actually walked around the campus, she was like, where's the city? Like, she just wanted a larger environment. And I just laughed because I thought, this is why you go, right? This is what you do. So I think getting out there and seeing campuses and looking around and seeing what will work best really is often the answer. While we do appreciate when you schedule and do an official tour, I also think if you're on a summer road trip somewhere and there's a college you can drive through, that can also be really valuable just to get a first peek at something and see if it really resonates with your student. Hopefully your experience will be better than my own, and you will, have a positive experience when you visit a school. We are still looking for ours. Anybody else want to add?
Sure.
Yeah.
I'll just say the second part of the question, how they can maximize their visits. I would always check and see what visit opportunities exist. A lot of schools will have open houses, and those are bigger visits. Those might be great for juniors that are just looking at a school for the first time. But as they get into their senior year and they have an inkling of what maybe they want to do, you can also set up personal visits at a lot of schools where you could meet with the professor, sit in on a class, talk with different department heads, and kind of customize it. So not every student will want to do that, and that is totally fine. I don't think I would want to sit in a class after being in high school classes, but some students may want to do that because they want to experience that and compare that at other schools. So I think that is helpful, utilizing that and seeing if schools do offer those individual visits, because even some big schools will do that. It's not just the small schools that offer that one-on-one individualized visit. And I would also say, on top of that, a lot of schools now are offering visit awards. So I know where I work and other schools that are represented up here, there are visit awards just for visiting campus. So stepping foot on campus allows you to receive a scholarship that is oftentimes renewable, and that's just for checking out campus.
Sorry about that. So my name is Natasha Diaz with Ohio State University, and I have a three-part question here. So the question is, what should students consider as they develop their college list? How important is it for students to know their major or career path before applying to college? And to how many colleges should students apply? So I'm going to try my best. If I forget something, please remind me to come back around. So I'll start with the easiest one. To how many colleges should students apply? So I used to, before I worked in admissions, I used to work directly with high school students, helping them transition to college. And our rule of thumb was always a bare minimum of 3 that you should apply to. That doesn't mean you have to apply to 30. Doesn't even mean you have to apply to 10, but bare minimum of 3. You know, some people call it a reach like where you think, maybe I can try and get in, you know, your safety school, and something else for fun. At least 3. Completely up to you, but think about things like those application fees. Those can start to rack up. Think about all the different ways that you have to apply. For example, if you used a Common Application, how many of us here use Common App? Everybody uses Common App. So look, that's easy right there. You kind of put your main information in, and then you just add in the additional question sections for each college you want to apply to. So if you're on something like Common App, that's a really easy way to apply to multiple schools fairly easily compared to if you have individual applications for each school. Another part of the question was, what should students consider as they develop their college list? There are so many things to consider. I mean, who has paper and pen? Do you want to start taking a list? There are so many things to consider. But let's talk about some of the most important ones that we see a lot of people look for. For example, the size of the school. We talked about that already. We're a big school, right? For some people, that might scare them away. They don't like that big school. Some people want that smaller school feel, or vice versa. What about the price? That's a big one, especially parents, guardians, you're out there like, yeah, price, let's look at that. You know, are you going out of state? Are you staying in state? So location, right? Your locations can determine how much money it's going to be for that school. So that if your sticker price is a major factor, that's something to look into. Along with that, financial aid opportunities. So if the sticker price is all the way up here, are they going to match it with financial aid that's all the way up here? Or is it more lopsided? So those are things to look into as you're making your list. As well as things like majors, which that is the second question. You see that segue there? So the second question was, how important is it for students to know their major or career plans? So it depends on what you would like to do. Because for example, if you want to study something like, shameless plug here, welding engineering, we're the only school, sorry guys, we're the only school in North America that's accredited to teach welding engineering. So if you really want to be a welding engineer, guess what? You have to come to us. So in a case like that, you really need to know what you want to study as you go forward. Otherwise, if you just think like, you know what, I want to get this degree, I want something general, I'll kind of figure it out when I get there, which is perfectly fine if you want to do that, okay, that's perfectly fine. Most of us all have programs like exploration or undecided or something to help you kind of figure out your major if you're kind of stuck. You have that option. So again, if you want like a highly specified major, then yeah, you have to make sure the school you applied for has that. Otherwise, you can kind of shop around and see what options you have. I think I answered everything, right? Okay. Anyone want to add anything?
Yeah, nice. So I've got the next question. My name is Toby Jones. I'm an admission counselor at John Carroll University. Like Natasha's question, this is a multi-part question, so I'm going to take some time and answer it. But colleges and universities are continuing to allow applicants to apply test optional. If applicants do not submit a score, how will their application be reviewed? Can students change their mind after they submit applications? And then how does this option impact consideration for merit scholarships? So that is a lot, and we'll cover all of it. At John Carroll, we are test optional. We also have a no harm policy. So if you decide to submit your test score, ACT or SAT, in no way, shape, or form is it going to harm you at all. It's not going to be considered to deny you admission to the university. If anything, it will increase your scholarship, your merit scholarship. That's the only thing your test scores can do for you. So the goal here is to try to alleviate some of the pressure that is associated with these standardized tests. We understand that the ACT and the SAT are not the demarcation of you as a student, but we also do want to reward you for good scores on those exams. If you don't submit a score, your application will be reviewed just like normal. Even if you do submit a score and it doesn't help your merit scholarship get boosted up, we as admission counselors, we will ignore it. It won't be considered for anything. But we still like for you to submit those test scores because it helps us on the academic success side. So if you're admitted into our university, a lot of times our academic success offices uses it to help place you in different classes on an entry-level basis. So those test scores still are important to us. So that's why we have a no harm policy to still encourage you to submit them, but they're never going to harm you. I want to make sure I answered every part of it. Can students change their mind after they submit applications? So let's say you submit your application and then you take another ACT or another SAT with a higher score and you want to submit it. For us, you can file a merit scholarship appeal. That process happens in January. So if you wanted to look into do that, you would contact someone like me, your admission counselor, and we can have a discussion to see if it would benefit you, and we can definitely get that process underway. Lastly, yeah, that's it.
Should we might maybe each of us talk about the test option because we're all so different. Test optional. Good times. Test optional at Miami. We are also test optional. We do not require test scores at Miami for any of our majors, programs, scholarships, nothing. But we, unlike John Carroll, if you do submit a low score, it can work against you. And so we try to kind of give you our averages and give you an idea of where the average student falls that submits a test score to kind of help you gauge if you want to submit your test score, if your student does. At Miami, our average ACT scores fall between a 26 and a 30, and we do super score. So if a student I'm working with has that level of score or higher, I would say, yeah, that's going to work in your favor. Absolutely submit it. If a student's coming in with a 25 ACT, I'd say, maybe do not submit that. Maybe just focus on your grades and your transcript. I say that having earned a 25 on the ACT myself, that is not a bad score by any means, but we just want to make sure it's working in your favor more than against you. Miami has a couple more selective programs in business and nursing that the average ACT is a little bit higher than that. And so, again, I always just talk with students individually and say, where is your GPA, where are your test scores, and let's compare. If one is stronger than the other, then it's probably smart to just submit the stronger portion. I just always tell students, put your best foot forward. Show us your best stuff you've got, and if that's just your transcript, that's fine. We are holistic in our review. It's unlikely that submitting or not submitting a test score is going to move the needle in terms of whether you get in or not, because there are so many other things that we consider that the test score is just number 12 of 12 things that we're looking at. So hopefully it's not too stressful. And I think you guys are kind of similar to John Carroll, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tasha, do you want to? And then there's Ohio State.
Well, that's super embarrassing. Sorry about that. Okay, so Ohio State. We have returned to test required. We were test required prior to COVID, so we have returned back to that. This is our first year, but for all classes moving forward, we will be test required. So we no longer have that test optional policy. So in order to be considered for Columbus campus, you do have to submit a test score, and we do have to receive it directly from the testing agency. We don't have a preference for ACT or SAT. So either one, and we will super score. We will use the super score that ACT sends. We no longer require, or ACT no longer requires science, so therefore we will not require the science section. The other thing to note is that it doesn't matter which test scores you sent us. You can send us 5 ACTs, 5 ACTs or SATs. We're only going to use your highest score. So if you send us a score and you're worried about sending it because you didn't have your coffee that day, you pulled an all-nighter, all of those things, we're only going to look at your highest score, okay? So you don't have to worry about which score should I send. So hopefully that makes it a little easier.
That's a good transition into this next question, Natasha. The next question is, what is the difference between the ACT and SAT, and do we have a preference for either test? I would hopefully safely assume that none of us have a preference. We'll take either one if you want to submit it. They're just different tests, so I think students tend to do better on one than the other. I'm going to have my daughter take both and just see how it goes. But there are nice charts online that are concordance charts where you can see this ACT is equivalent to this SAT score. And so if you take both, then you can compare and know which one you've done better on. And then how many times do you recommend a student take each test? And should you send your scores as a high school junior? The last part of that question, should you send your scores as a high school junior? I think the answer to that you nailed. Like, it doesn't hurt you to send your scores as a junior if you're applying to a school that requires a test score, because that school is always going to just take your highest scores. I would assume that most schools operate in that way, that your highest score, your best performance is always what schools will look at. But for schools like Miami that are test optional, you may not want to send your scores to us until you decide whether or not, when you're applying for admission, you want us to use those scores. Full disclosure, on the application that your students will submit as seniors, there's a question that says, do you want us to use your ACT scores? Yes or no. You check the box and that's what we do. So even if you did send us your scores as a junior and we have them in our file, if you tell us not to use them, we don't use them. That being said, that is a whole lot of stress for students. I feel like when students have sent us scores in the past and then decide they don't want us to use them, it's just like, oh my gosh, but they have them. Like, they're going to use them. And it's very stressful. So even though we're not using them, I think probably if you're starting as a junior looking at this, it makes sense to just hold on to the scores for yourself. And then when you hit senior year and you start applying to schools and you start comparing all of the schools and what each school requires, what each school's test average is, and where you fall within that, then you can make a decision on where you'll be sending those scores. And you might send them to John Carroll but not to Miami, or to Miami but not to Ohio State, and that's fine. That's where we are today, but then you're kind of in control of where they go, and they're not just floating out there everywhere.
Yeah. And before I answer the next question, which is similar to what we've been talking about, what I would also recommend, I feel like this is a lot of information overload right now, and even for us that have been doing this for many, many years, I think the most important thing to take away from this is that each college has representatives like us, and we work with your students. I'm regionally based, Heather's regionally based, Natasha's regionally based. We live up in the area, even though our offices are not in the Cleveland area. So we are here to help you. If your student has a question, talk to your counselors here at the school, because they have a good idea. They've been doing this for a long time. So there are resources to help you if you're undecided about what should I do. Should I send the score? Should I not? Also keep in mind, not all schools require it to come directly from the ACT or SAT testing agency itself. So for example, if you applied to a school and you didn't put them on your original ACT, sometimes you have to pay to go back in and send it to them. Whereas schools like us, you could self-report. You could have your counselor send them. You could send us a copy of your official score that you get in an email. I know that's not the case for every school, but just some things to keep in mind, and just ask the questions up front before you go back and do that. But my question is, the ACT has now made the science test optional. Do colleges have a preference on whether or not students take the science test? And I think talking with everyone, nobody is requiring it anymore if it's not, required and it's optional. We were at a conference a couple weeks ago where there were panelists from all the private schools in Ohio and public schools, and some were offering advice of, if you are going into you think you want to go into a STEM field, the science, technology, engineering, or math, it wouldn't hurt you to take it, because a strong score could help you in placement, like Toby mentioned earlier, into some of these classes. But from what we heard again, these were mostly Ohio schools, that it is not going to be required by any school. And I know that Natasha said it's not, and usually Ohio State is our pioneer in the state of Ohio. So I don't think that one will be required by many schools, at least in Ohio.
Okay, so now we can move on from ACT and SAT, the hot seat here. The next question I have here is, when should students begin to apply for college in their senior year? Right now. So look at the deadlines for every school that you wish to apply to. Most of the time you'll have at least 2 deadlines. For example, for us, we have early action deadline and then regular decision. Some schools have early decision. So if you want to know the difference between the two, early action. That's yours, sorry, I'm jumping ahead. I'm stealing her question here, I'm sorry about that. So we have, for example, early now I'm confusing them, early action deadline of November 1st. So if you want to be considered for things like merit scholarships, certain programs, you want to apply by that early action deadline. Everybody have an early action deadline? November 1st, everybody? Yeah. November 1st is a hot date, yeah. We all know November 1st. Otherwise, for example, our regular decision deadline is January 15th. Everyone else around there? February 1? February 1? March? Okay, so we're a little all over the place for a regular decision. But the one key to know is that November 1st. So again, if you want to be considered for things like free money, right, nice programs, other really great things, you usually want to apply around now because it's to meet those early deadlines, because it kind of lets the schools know that you're really interested in them, so then therefore it allows the schools to consider you for more things. Now, of course, again, you still have time until that regular decision if you so choose. Most of the time, I'll see a lot of students who want to hold off on applying to apply regular decision because they want to use their first semester grades to help boost their GPA. I know at least in our case, we won't consider. Anyone else? Will you consider first semester grades?
If they're on there, yeah.
Yeah, if they're on there.
Okay, so it's just us again.
No,
So for us, at least, we won't consider first semester grades, like if you hold off. So it's still in your best interest to apply early action. So at the end of the day, like a lot of us, we're the same for a lot of things, but here and there's going to be some differences. So really, the best thing is to do your research into the school that you're interested in applying and see exactly what the policies are. For the most part, you're going to find everything online. You can reach out to someone, like everyone's mentioned before. You can reach out to admissions counselors like us and things like that. And I'll tell you right now, the first thing I'm going to do is go online and search first to make sure that I have the most up-to-date information, because that's where even myself, that's where I'm going to find it, is online on our websites.
Another thing I would add to that is just that typically when students have to apply by November 1st, there's usually a deadline at your high school that is a little bit ahead of that to make sure, because your student is submitting their Common App online. That is only a portion of what we need. We also need transcripts from Avon Lake High School and potentially test scores, as we discussed, if you're planning to send those, and all that stuff takes time. So usually, and high school counselor, correct me if I'm wrong, but usually you need at least a 2-week, 10-day window where the student will put in their request for the transcript from Avon Lake High School to be sent to Miami, for example. And when that transcript actually arrives at Miami, you can imagine how many students are in the senior class and then how many colleges each one is applying to. There are a lot of transcripts flying out of the window at Avon Lake High School on a daily basis. So just keep in mind that the deadline for the Common App probably isn't the only deadline you're working under. There's probably an earlier deadline at school that, school wants to have that request in to know that they have to send the transcript out to whatever number of schools that your son or daughter's applying to.
Yeah, so going into the different deadlines that some schools offer, early decision and early action are the most common. There's also regular decision as well. We at Ohio Wesleyan have early decision. It's a small portion of our students, but it is a way for students to have that decision early and commit early. Other schools in Ohio and outside of Ohio as well use early decision. So basically it is a binding decision. So if you have a student that knows that they want to go to a certain school that offers early decision, and if they get in, they are 100% committing, they can apply early decision. So if they're accepted, they have to withdraw their applications from all other schools, and you can only apply to one school early decision. So keep that in mind. It is a little tricky because you don't necessarily have your financial information. Some schools may give you that depending on when you apply, when they release their decisions, and the FAFSA is open. But for the most part, you do, have to commit without the full financial picture, because some scholarships have other deadlines. But this might be for a student. For example, at Ohio Wesleyan, we do not deny a student an early decision. So worst case, we would roll that student over to early action and maybe ask for updated first quarter grades or whatever it may be, another writing sample. It depends on the situation, but it wouldn't be we don't personally flat out deny. Some schools may, but that's just how our process works. It also might be, as I think Heather was talking about earlier, when you're looking at those medians of test scores and GPA and whatnot, if you are borderline at a school that you're applying to, maybe early decision shows your interest and shows that you are much more interested in them than any other school. So by giving them that little, comfort of, hey, I'm committing if you'll let me in, maybe then that would be that could be a student that they admit that if that student applied a couple months later in early action, they wouldn't get in. So there's just different reasonings for different schools. It's not for everyone. And like I said, a small minority at Ohio Wesleyan apply like early decision. The majority of students apply early action. And early action, I think, is also important too. While we do have, most of us have regular decisions, a lot of our our special scholarship deadlines are before the regular decision deadline. So if you want to be considered for additional scholarships and some of the other ones that we offer, and you apply too late, you've missed the deadline for those. So that's why I think it's great. And I mean, early action is not super early. November is not, that bad. Even if a student starts their application now, there's still plenty of time to complete it. So that's kind of the difference in the two.
The other thing I want to add to those like different terms, early decision, early action, is rolling admission. We have, at John Carroll, we have an early action deadline. That's November 1st, like a couple other schools are talking about. But we also have our regular decision, which is February 1st. A lot of other schools were saying that too. But then there's rolling admission. So even if you miss both of those deadlines and you decide, hey, maybe I do want to apply to John Carroll, maybe I do want to go to Miami, you can still apply rolling decision. Sometimes this isn't super advantageous. You might not get as many scholarship opportunities as you would when you were early action, but you still have the opportunity to be admitted into the university. So another reason to reach out to your admission counselor. Any kind of representatives that you see up here would be helpful to kind of see what the process is for applying after those deadlines happen. Oh, I am up next. Okay. Now listen, this is a really long question with multiple parts, and we're all gonna chip in as we answer this question together. So, during a holistic review, what specific factors do colleges use as they make admission decisions? So, John Carroll specifically, because this is going to be really college specific, institution specific. John Carroll, we use a holistic review. So some schools use a merit-based review or holistic review. We use a holistic review as a Jesuit institution. Basically, not only are we looking at your GPA, your transcripts, your test scores if you choose to submit them, but we're also looking at the other portions of your common application. So your activity section, you want to make sure you include service hours, any leadership things that you've done in high school, any activities that you've been involved in, sports that you've been involved in, all those kinds of things are really important to us so that we can see, all the other things that you've been involved in high school. In addition to that, you want to make sure you spend some time on your essay as well, because we do, believe it or not, read your college essay. Things that we look for, this is a question in here, this is one of the sub-questions. One of the things that we look for when we read your essay is, of course, kind of the things that your English teacher is looking for. So good grammar, good syntax, like punctuation, capital letters, things like that, when they should be. Kind of just making sure it's a polished essay for the college level. That's what we're really looking for, as well as we want to hear about you. So an example that I use, because I think I made this mistake when I was applying to colleges, a lot of students end up writing their college essay about maybe a family member that passed away, or maybe you broke your leg playing a sport. I'm sure that we've all read lots of applications that are kind of similar to that, which is fine. I wrote about my grandmother who had dementia and she passed away. But the issue that I ran into, that I didn't know I ran into, is I wrote about my mom and how, I saw her being a leader and she was a great person. That's great, but you should write about yourself. What did I learn through those experiences? How did I grow through those experiences? Because it's really important that you've gone through that experience, but we want to see what it taught you. We want to see the growth that you've had through that experience. Yeah, so that's the first question I'll answer. If anybody wants to tackle the second. Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah, okay.
We require them. Miami requires, so we're talking about the parts of the application. We talked about holistic review, talked about essays, and resume, optional if you want to. And then the next bullet says, what is the role of a teacher or counselor recommendation? At Miami, we require one letter of recommendation as a part of your application to Miami, and it can be from either a teacher or a school counselor, whoever you feel knows you best. I always think of that, and since we have a lot of parents in the room, I think this is going to make more sense, but I always think of that as like the Yelp review of a student. When I say that to students, they're like, what's Yelp? But for parents, I think it's just a third-party endorsement of your student, someone who is outside of your student's social circle who can speak to their academic abilities. So whether that's a counselor who's worked with them, for 4 years since they've been in high school, or whether that's a teacher who's had them 1 year, or maybe you're lucky that you've had a teacher more than 1 year in, a different class or a different subject. I always tell juniors to be especially nice to their teachers, because usually those are the teachers that end up getting asked to write the recommendation letters at the start of a student's senior year. Their senior year teachers, they typically don't know as well yet, because it's pretty early in their senior year that they're applying. But it plays a great role, and I think it's really nice when you're reading a recommendation to hear things like, this is a student that sits in the front row of class every day, or this is a student that happily contributes to discussions every day, or this is a student that works well with other students in a group. Those aren't things you can see on a student's transcript, and understandably, in many cases, many of those students with glowing recommendations are fine for admission. They're probably getting into Miami either way. But we revisit that recommendation for our honors college evaluation. We revisit that recommendation for scholarships, for full ride scholarships. So that recommendation for us, we go back to it again and again, and maybe for admission it's just icing on the cake, but for a more generous scholarship it might make the difference. Likewise with an essay or something a little bit more of a story about a student might make a difference outside of just regular strong grades and everything that you're submitting with your transcript. Anybody else want to chime in on Rex?
No,
Or
I
the
think we
next
both
part?
said ours are optional. So you're more than welcome to submit them, but don't require them. So I'll just kind of touch on the last point with demonstrated interest. As Heather was talking about for some special scholarships, I know that is something that we kind of consider demonstrated interest for. We do have full ride scholarships as well. It's not a requirement by any means, because I think you cross that fine line of like access to, because not all students can travel to visit your campus, and that's totally fine, but they can reach out to an admission counselor. We have, we can log our communication and see that a student has called and asked a question or emailed. So demonstrated interest can be many things, not just physically visiting a campus. So that, is just always helpful. As I mentioned earlier, reach out, ask the questions, and really, kind of advocate for yourself there.
Yeah, piggybacking off of that, we also at John Carroll, we use demonstrated interest, and this is for every student and for admission to the university as well. Basically, how I describe it is the more you show interest in John Carroll, the better it looks on your application. So coming to a table if we're at a fair that you're at, or if we come to your high school for a high school visit, I'm sure a lot of us are eventually at some point this fall. Stop by our table, fill out one of our inquiry cards, let us know that you met us, and it'll go in our system. You'll get points for that, and when we go to read your application, you already kind of have a little bit of a leg up because you've expressed interest in our university.
Steal that for a second. Miami's been leaning into demonstrated interest like crazy in the last year. Not gonna lie, I have mixed feelings on it. But what we're doing with demonstrated interest is kind of interesting. Our business school specifically is pretty selective at Miami. We have roughly 1,100 seats for freshmen every year, the freshman class, and then there's a few transfers that come in, but freshman class, 1,100 seats. Last year, we had 12,000 applicants to the business school, and we're also test optional, so we had a lot of applicants with really strong grades and no other differentiation, outside of looking at things like an essay and a rec letter and things. And so what we did in that case last year is kind of look to see, who was looking at emails, who had visited, who had engaged with us in whatever way, and who kind of just looked like they put us on their application, because we have a free application. We use Common App. It's not that hard to submit your application to Miami, but are you really serious about liking it? I think for students, in the case of Miami, students that are actually interested in Miami and, have either visited or have, in some way or another, like saw me at their high school or something. We have a very sophisticated system where we record all of that stuff, and I think it becomes pretty obvious for students that are interested that they are interested. But on the flip side, if a student isn't interested, that's not a student that's going to get one of the 1,100 seats out of the 12,000 applicants. So that's where we've leaned into it. I mean, if you're not applying to more selective program for us, then it's really not that big of a deal. So I guess it depends on what major you're looking at. But I think with our selective majors, that's kind of where we've had to dig in because that's the variable we have. And then there's Ohio State.
And then there's us. We do not take into account demonstrated interest at all. We had 90,000 applicants last year. We're not tracking all of that. You can email me, I'll answer you, great to talk to you, and then it's just going in a box, and I'm not counting that. We're not counting it for anything specifically for demonstrated interest. We do track, of course, like if you do visit campus, just so we know, like we call it kind of like touch points, like, you came to campus, you got a high school visit from us, things like that, but it doesn't do anything as far as our admissions process.
Okay, next up. Explain the Common Application and the benefits of completing it. I would absolutely advocate for completing the Common Application because all of us take it. What are there now? 800, 900 schools? Maybe more that take it. It's rare to run across a school that doesn't take the Common Application. And for those of you, I don't know if many of you are my age, but I do not remember the Common App being so common when I was applying to college, so I was doing 3 individual applications. The only downside I would see of the Common App is that it is pretty thorough, it's pretty long, and so if you are only applying to 2 colleges and you're not following Natasha's advice of applying to 3, but if you're only applying to 2 colleges and those 2 colleges have shorter, quicker applications that aren't the behemoth that is the Common App, because it's a big application, then it makes sense just to do individual, maybe you're individually applying to Toledo or Bowling Green and nowhere else. And so maybe in that case, it's easier or quicker to do the school's individual application. Some schools don't even have an individual application. Miami University, we literally just take the Common App. So, but if occasionally there are both, so you can always check to see which one might be more convenient for you. Also with a school that has more than one application, like their own, and then the Common App, schools sign an agreement with the Common App saying that they won't look at the Common App any less favorably than they look at their own application. So it doesn't work to your advantage to do one or the other in the admission process. They're really all treated equally. Is that anything else?
I mean, the second part of that was essentially asking which one to do. And the only thing I'll say is that with the Common App, it is a little bit easier to request the documents. So you can request your transcripts straight through there, and that goes to your counselor. You can request the teacher recommendations right through there. That goes to the teacher. You enter their email, and then they can upload everything. Whereas if you do an institutional application, they typically have to send those separately. It's not that big of a deal, but it is just a different way when you're applying using an institutional application or the Common App. But yeah, my question was just if a university offers both, how would you advise students to apply? And Heather kind of answered that, and I think it's, depends on where you're looking at and where you're going. If an application's free, it's free on both, so it's not like it would just be free on the Common App versus the institutional app.
I guess I have the next question again, which is describe academic support services offered to students. I'm sure they vary at all of our schools, so we can all answer that. And then how are they obtained? At Miami, whenever I think of academic support services, they fall in 2 categories for me. One is like I need tutoring because I'm not doing so well in calculus, and the other is I have an IEP and I need actual services, through an office at Miami. So let's start with number 1, which would be I'm in calculus and I'm not doing well. We have services at Miami that we have a tutoring center. It's called the Ranella Learning Center. It's open to any student, and we have literally everything from like study groups for calculus or some of the harder classes that we find the students struggle with. We literally go down to, we have students that will go to the calculus class. They're like paid tutors, and they will attend a calculus class every week, and then they will run a tutoring session based on the content in that specific calculus class for any student to attend and get help with. So there's a lot of help at a university level for students in rigorous courses such as, organic chemistry, calculus, courses that generally tend to cause us all a lot of stress, those resources exist. So, and then for students that have a specific IEP or 504 plan or whatever they're working under, there's also what we call our Miller Center for Student Disability Services. And those are people who work to implement specific services like extended time on testing or, any number of things that students are qualifying for. And they work to apply those services with professors in the classroom. So that's a much more formalized process where you're submitting medical documentation prior to moving in, and then, working with a specific coach in their center to make sure that all those services are implemented. I think the one thing when you are a student with an IEP or a 504, just to keep in mind when you get to college is self-advocacy is so important. Up until this point, you've been living at home with your parents as a student, and probably your mom and dad have really been able to help out in this process. I know my daughter works in something like that too, and I'm always doing things for her, which I should take my own advice. But that being said, once you get to college, it is kind of on you as a student to, go to the Miller Centers for Disability Services, make sure they have everything on file, make sure you're utilizing the services. The onus falls much more to the student. And because they're 18, we really don't often communicate to parents if that isn't happening. So it's just important for them to own that process themselves. That was a really long answer, sorry.
I was just going to piggyback on the end of that. I've worked at other schools, and I think what is important is if your student does have an individual plan or they're on an IEP, whatnot, see how they're treated before you're officially committed to those schools. I worked at a school one time that wouldn't even talk to a student until they were an admitted student. And I think that's hard because, you're taking the time to apply to a school if you think the services will be provided. So just keep in mind, like how you're treated up to a certain point. I think that is a reflection then of maybe how, accommodating and the treatment will be maybe when you were at the school. And that's not always the case, but, those are things I think to keep in mind because there are some barriers in some places.
All good things. And piggybacking once again, we talked about, at John Carroll, we just call it different things. So our student accessibility services provide accommodations to students who might have maybe you had an IEP in high school, you want to continue that in college. Our Center for our student accessibility services will help you do that. But in addition to that, we also have tutors, and we have academic success, which I mentioned when we talked about ACT scores and SAT scores a little bit. They also help you when it comes to kind of just being a college student in general. So a lot of times I'm sure you've already heard kind of horror stories of people going away to college and then realizing that they didn't know how to study. It does happen sometimes, and for us, our academic success department is there to kind of help students in that area. So help you learn how to study, help you learn what your study style is, help you with time management. They even have courses for students who are undecided in what area they want to study major-wise. So kind of navigating different areas of academics in general, that's what the big thing that our academic success office does. But in addition to all that kind of help, office hours. Office hours are huge in college. So it gets you FaceTime with your professors. We talked about organic chemistry. A little flashback happened for me. Same with calculus. These are kind of difficult classes. Or any class maybe you might not be, specifically strong in. Maybe you're not strong in history and you have to take a history class. Go to your professor's office hours. At John Carroll, professors have to hold a certain number of office hours, and sometimes students don't go, and their doors just open and they're eating their lunch. So you can go, you can just pick their brain, you can ask them questions about the lecture, and that more FaceTime that you have with that professor, they know that you've been putting in that extra work, and a lot of times it gives you brownie points. They, once again, see you as a full person, a holistic person. So I want to add that in too.
Okay, so next question is describe an honors college or honors program and what are the advantages of applying to an honors college within a university, and also describe scholars programs and their benefits. So I'll describe ours. I think we mostly will be similar, but if anyone wants to chip in afterwards and say any differences. So for us, we have honors program and scholars programs. So honors program is going to be kind of what it sounds like on its face value. So it's like academically focused. There are honors faculty, honors courses that are closed just to honors students. We also have honors residence halls where the whole building will just be students who are in the honors program. So obviously it might be a little quieter, people more focused on their studies and things like that. Each honors program is specific to the academic college. So for example, if you're in the College of Engineering, they have their honors program, or the College of Arts and Sciences. They have their honors program, and so there might be different requirements based on, there's some kind of bug up here that likes me apparently, I'm sorry, I'm not just crazy swiping around. So there might be separate requirements based on that specific college. Some of them might require like a thesis or a research project in order to then graduate with honors at the end after you complete the honors program. For us, you will indicate whether you're interested in honors or scholars on the common application. There's no separate application for it. You just kind of opt into it on the common application. The big perk that a lot of students are interested in for the honors program is that you get priority scheduling, which means like your scheduling window opens up earlier, so you can kind of get the best classes that you want or the best times and things like that. So that's a big perk that people are interested in. Scholars program is sort of academically and socially focused. So what it is a group of students who live together in a residence hall. It might be like one specific floor that's closed off just for students in that scholars program. And the scholars program can be based on, say, either their major or maybe an interest. And so you're with like-minded individuals in that residence hall. And then there might be some different programming or even trips involved for specific honors or scholars programs. Same thing with the honors is that you would opt into it, to the application process of it on the common application, so no separate application required. You just indicate yes if you'd like honors or scholars, so you do have to choose between the two. And that's how we operate ours. Anyone want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, every institution is maybe a little bit different, maybe kind of the same, but we call it something different. At John Carroll, we have three, we call them mission-based programs. So one is our honors program, another is our leadership program, and then another is our Rupe Scholars program. The Rupe Scholars is a really unique one, kind of specific to social justice and community service. Once again, Jesuit institution, we lean into things like that. But with our Honors College and all of our mission-based programs, priority registration is a big perk, and we also have a specific residence hall that all of these programs can live in together. We call it a living learning community. And then there's other perks to each program kind of specifically, but we kind of talked about that holistic application review as well. So going back to that a little bit, as readers, we a lot of times will suggest you for these programs based on your application and your activities that you were involved in. So if you did a lot of community service and you had a lot of leadership experience, or you took a lot of like honors or AP classes, we might suggest you to apply for these different programs, and that could be how you get into one of those. So that too.
All right, so my question might be a hot topic now. What do colleges have to say about AI use in the college application process? I just read an essay a couple days ago, and it was 100% AI, and you can tell. You can tell. I could absolutely tell. And what you can tell is because we offer opportunities other places. Like we have a supplemental essay that's optional, students can answer, and that supplemental essay was written completely different than the regular essay. And so it's flagged. It's not necessarily plagiarism, you know. It's but it's recognizable, and it's not benefiting the student because it's not written in their language. It's not talking about their personal experiences. It is, you know, using the hyphens that you can tell from ChatGPT. And so, yeah, so I think that, you know, they might be thinking, oh, they won't notice, but, you know, we see your writing in other parts of the application as well. And so when there's a big disparity like that, it is pretty obvious. But, you know, somebody had mentioned this at a couple weeks ago that, you know, at the high school level, I think students are probably more apt and comment, like they know AI better than we do. And so there are definitely tools that can help assist, you know, if you're looking for ideas or how to start things, or, you know, there are ways that you can definitely utilize it to help with your application. But it is only disadvantaging the student if they are using it fully for those things that we want to see and hear personal stories and learn more about the students. So it's not necessarily a I don't know, denial, if, if we see that. But again, it's a big disadvantage for the student because they're not allowing themselves to shine in that light that, we want to see through their essay, so.
I'll just add, when it comes to AI, like the genie's out of the bottle. We know we can't put them back in. Like AI's out here, it's here to stay. We're not going to penalize a student for using AI, but what we expect is to see the student's actual work. We hope that you use AI as a tool, just like just about anything else, like going to your English teacher and getting some pointers. That's a tool, right? Your English teacher's not writing your paper for you, right? So think of AI in that sort of way. Like she clearly mentioned, we can tell, so it doesn't behoove you to do it. It doesn't look good, especially if there's competitive admissions process and things like that. I might be like, I wanted to like you. That's just an example, but maybe. But yeah, use it as a tool. Please don't use it to fully do the work for you.
Yeah, I second all of that. I always say it's like a calculator. Use it as a tool, and that beginning stage, brainstorming, understanding ideas, maybe how to put things together, but there should definitely be a point where you stop and then you take over writing your essay. That brings us to our last question, or at least the last question on the handouts that we were given. Then we can open it up for more discussion, more questions from the audience. But what should the parents' role be in the college selection and application process? So, we can all answer this, but my advice would be encouragement and support. I think that's the biggest one. As students, we all talked about the Common Application, how it can be overwhelming at times, but taking it kind of chunk by chunk, doing a little bit every week, a little bit each day, eventually, by the time November 1st rolls around, or what any of those deadlines are, if you do it chunk by chunk, it's a lot more feasible. It seems more human when you do it that way. But a lot of encouragement to keep going, encouragement to keep visiting campuses, encouragement not to get bogged down by a lot of the emails that our colleges, our institutions might send, encouragement to have your student take the lead on a lot of these things. This is their experience. This is what they'll end up doing. So having them kind of put their first foot forward or their best foot forward when they're kind of doing this search process is really going to benefit them in the long run.
I would also just add that a lot of schools, I know us at Ohio Wesleyan and other schools too, we have created and customized things to be more parent specific. So we have our own parent portal that is for parents. You can log in, you can see things that are specific to you. So there are ways for you to get information that is helpful for you to understand, for you to share with your student, where it's kind of still letting them be in the driver's seat, but also making sure you are seeing these things in the way that you should be, and so that way you can encourage and you can check in with them. So there are a lot of parent websites specifically that are parent friendly, that are giving you ideas, advice, what you could be doing to support your students. So there are a lot of resources out there that different schools provide that is parent specific, that allows you to kind of see where your student is and where you could help them.
I'm going to steal a thing that Natasha's colleague Tracy told once on a panel. She also works at Ohio State. It's the best story, I think, because she likened the college admission process and parents' involvement similar to when you teach your student to drive, which I am also doing right now. So it's very relevant to me. But I know in my case, my daughter, she just got her license. So when we started driving, there was a lot of me being the driver and telling her things to do, right? And telling her you can go right on red, but not on, you can't go left on red. That seems to be an issue for us. But, just different little things along the way. And eventually, much to my own chagrin, I had to let go and let her be behind